Impeccable timing, sir.
Well, timing's everything, huh?
Yes.
Hello, everybody. How are you? Nice to see you. Sorry,
We did this.
as you might guess, I'm on a very steep learning curve here, learning how to campaign and do all of this. The first time I'm doing this, but I've got a number of really smart people that I've surrounded myself with, and some of Gabby's team's been very helpful to get me going. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself and maybe mention why I decided to run, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I recognize a lot of faces in the audience, so you know I've been in town for a long time, and as you know, I've done a lot of jobs here in town. I've been a police officer, I've run your trauma center, a professor at the university, I teach, and been here about 27 years now. And I came actually recruited to start the first trauma system, and I promised my wife I'd only stay 2 years. We didn't even know where Tucson was at the time. And we loved the place. We never left, and we raised our kids here, and my kids got married here, and so this is home. And you know, as you know, I ended up going to Washington to be the United States Surgeon General, and I did that, and I always intended to come back, but I never intended to pursue a political position. I have many jobs now, and I'm very happy teaching at the university, being vice chairman of Canyon Ranch, running the institute, which tries to improve the health of underserved communities in our community as well as around the country, and we've done our first international program. And I still work at the government level. I'm the vice president of the Department of Defense Policy Board. So it's a really rich and full life. So I really was not looking to go into politics, to be honest with you. But I got a number of calls from a lot of people you know, some at a local level, a lot of folks I know. Many of the people that were called me were people that we would be commiserating with how bad government was, and you know, gosh, we should do something about this, and can't somebody make a decision? And I was jumping in there like the rest of them, saying it is terrible, and let me tell you how bad it is, because I've been there, you know. And then people started, well, why don't you go back? Why don't you go run for office? I said, no, I've been there. That's why I don't want to go back. And you know, after the summer, I thought through it a lot. A lot of folks call me. Eventually, the calls came from friends, elected officials on both sides of the aisle, actually, back in D.C. The president called me, the Senate Majority Leader, minorities. I talked to a number of people, and I was very empowered because when they put the politics at the door, most of them said to me, you know, this is a unique opportunity, you should serve, because it's very unusual to have somebody being recruited to be a U.S. Senator. And I had Republicans said that to me as well as Democrats. They said this is a matter of service. And these are friends of mine that because as Surgeon General, I work both sides of the aisle. I couldn't get my job done without working both sides of the aisle to move health policy. So I gave it thought long and hard, and then of course I went to my commander-in-chief and asked for permission, and my wife said, you want to do what? and I said, yeah, I think it's the right thing to do. And she struggled with it, but you know, she came around and she said to me, you should do this. I mean, you're very fortunate to have gotten all you've done in life, and the family's willing to sacrifice, and you know, you should do this. And she was very supportive. I'll move to the front of the story now because I've given you a little background. It's just many of you maybe don't know my background, but you know, I never planned to do any of this. I come from a very poor Hispanic family. I was homeless as a kid. I was first born in this country. My parents are immigrants, and they spoke English as a second language. And when I was 6 years old, we were homeless. And so the struggles of the regular person I understand firsthand because I lived the health disparities and not having access to care and all of that. But my savior was going in the Army at 17 after I dropped out of high school, and you know, I never looked back and got a GED and lots of opportunity. So I got this kind of ethos, if you will, to always serve. I mean, I served at local, state, national level, and I consider it a privilege to serve the people. So with that, and because of that, I decided to go give it a shot. And I'm committed to serve as your United States Senator, to serve you, to address your needs. I have a fairly good reputation in Washington because I did work both sides of the aisle for a long time and have friends on both sides of the aisle, and I understand how partisan things can be and how difficult they are. But on the other hand, my job is not to have an allegiance to a party or to any particular area. My allegiance is to stay focused on you, because that's what I did as Surgeon General. As Surgeon General, I right away realized that my job was not to be the Surgeon General of the Republican or the Democratic Party. My job was to be the doctor of the nation and stay focused on what your needs are. And then many of you who followed the press, you know that I took some heat for some of those things, you know, on very controversial issues. But I never stood down because it was the right thing to do. Again, my job was not to placate either party or keep them happy. My job was to ensure that I was giving you all the best information and supporting you the best I could as the doctor of the nation. And so now I get a chance to go back and do it again. And I consider myself a pretty moderate, fair, centrist person. I listen a lot, but I don't have any problem with making decisions once I've gotten all the facts. There's a lot of things that need to be done, not only in Washington, but at a local level. And certainly we know that there's been an absence of senatorial leadership south of our Mason-Dixon line for a long time, you know? And I think we deserve more than that. You know, I've worked in your community, our community, for over a quarter of a century. I've worked the border for 25 years as a doctor, as a police officer, as Surgeon General. I know the culture, I know the language, I know the immigration issues probably better than most. I teach policy at the university, you know, and so I think I bring a lot of things to the table, not as a politician, but just as a citizen who has had a lot of experiences at a local, state, and a national level, and I'm willing to apply that again if you'll afford me the opportunity to be your next senator of this great state. So with that, I'll stop, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions if there's time.
Yeah, I know that we have at least 2 members of the press here that might, I'll let them ask first, and then, you know, then you guys get to answer the good questions.
Sure.
Did you guys
I didn't know. Hey, press guys, how you doing?
Hello, press guy.
Why are you running as a Democrat after being an independent for so many years?
That's a great question, and I really valued my independence because I didn't want to get locked into any one particular area. And I truly believe that often there are good answers on both sides of the aisle if people could just put down their partisan politics and look at the issue rather than being worried about keeping a party in power or getting reelected. And so, as I thought through this, and I had an opportunity, I could have run at any party or even independent, and I looked at what the issues were and what the issues are that are germane to Arizona, and it was clear to me that the Democratic Party resonated most closely with me, especially on like issues of immigration, women's rights, you know, right to choose for women, things like that that I've dealt with as Surgeon General. And I said, you know, really, neither party, quite frankly, was perfect for me, and I don't think it's perfect for you. We all see things that we'd like changed in both parties. But as I looked and I said, what are the big issues in Arizona? Well, it's like the nation, economy, and jobs, and so on. But when I looked at health issues, when I looked at the issues of us seeking some type of health care for all Americans, when I looked at immigration, when I looked at women's issues, clearly I resonated more closely with the Democratic Party, and that's why I chose the Democratic Party.
Dylan's my editor, so I have to make sure that. Did you have anything? Or?
Yeah, I've got a couple. As a Democrat seeking the senatorial nomination, you're getting a little bit of a slow start out of the gate, and you're facing Democrats from Maricopa County who've been running longer, raising money longer.
Yeah.
How do you get over that hurdle? What's your strategy?
Well, my strategy is to get out as much as I can and speak to people, but also to let them see how I distinguish myself from the other candidates. I've never been a politician, okay? I'm not a lawyer, all right?
That seems to resonate.
Well, but I think many of the people, I recognize a lot of faces, they know me because I've been here as a police officer, I've been here as a soldier, I've been here as Surgeon General, I've been a professor at the university, I've worked the border. I mean, these are not foreign issues to me. And most of those people that I see that are running, they've read the papers about it. You know, they've got their briefings and they understand and they've got their sound bites. I live this. This is my life, okay? I've been here, you know, for pretty much my adult life, having to deal with these issues on a daily basis in law enforcement, in the military, as the Surgeon General of the United States. So I feel I will tell my story, and I hope that the people will see that the differentiating factor is you have somebody that's understanding, that knows the culture, that knows the people, and has lived these problems himself, and has not been a politician. So I think that clearly differentiates me. But I will tell you the other thing is, you know, when I was nominated for Surgeon General, everybody said he doesn't have a chance. He's an independent, He doesn't belong to any party. He didn't donate large sums of money. You know, he doesn't have the pedigree for this job. I was told that by an elected official. You don't have the pedigree. But I was the last guy standing after several hundred interviews, and I did get the job, and I served as Surgeon General. So those kind of barriers don't dissuade me. You know, I think I'm capable and up to it, and the real deciding factor is going to be that you all trust me enough to give me the opportunity to serve.
After that experience in Washington, which wasn't always the most fun for you, you know, why do you want to go back?
Well, a lot of people have asked me that. A lot of people have asked me that, and you know, the real issue is it would have been easy to turn the other cheek and say, you know what, it's not my problem. Let the right and left keep battling and beating each other up, and you know, with this partisan vitriolic stuff and throwing grenades at each other, and nothing gets done. They just keep blaming each other. But I've been there. I've been in those meetings. I've seen the people. And when I had to get things solved, I had to bring the right and the left together to deal with policy issues, to deal with anything that I had responsibility for. So many of the people that call me, locally as well as nationally, you know, they said, Rich, you know, you've got a good track record. You've done this stuff before. Why don't you go and try it again? So I'm doing it because I've had the experience and I think I could bring some added value, but I also feel the obligation to return because, you know, the country's been very good to me and my family. I started with nothing. You know, I was a homeless kid. So what do I have to complain about? And if I can't use my skills to improve the lives of others, then, you know, I think I'm shirking my duty.
I want to, yeah, and I do want to stay for a little while for more questions because I think
I'm
this,
happy to,
yeah,
yes.
I think this is your first Democratic meeting to talk to.
I've gone to some smaller ones in homes and private homes, but not the party meetings like this in a larger place.
Okay. So,
I'm just into this about a month, guys. I'm really a newbie.
Okay, Dr. Carmona,
Sure.
I'm sure you're watching the presidential, the Republican primary, and you're watching how nasty it's getting.
I'm trying not to watch.
Are you prepared? And you know it's going to get nasty, especially in Arizona. Are you ready to handle some of that stuff?
Well, I don't think I have any choice, but you know, my good friend Ron Barber has put together this group on civility, and I'm one of his board members. And all of us are committed to a more civil discourse in our politics. I think it's okay to disagree. That's what democracy is all about. But we should be able to sit down for the benefit of the people we have the privilege to serve to address those issues. And everybody may not get everything. But I recognize people will accuse me of all kinds of things. I mean, I went through that as Surgeon General, you know. But if that's the price I have to pay for the privilege to serve, then I'm willing to take the shot, you know, and I'll do it.
You don't have any baggage in your closet? I don't mean to sound
You do,
facetious,
get it all out now.
but I'm
Get it all
telling you,
out
you
now.
know.
Okay.
we're all friends.
Well, let me just answer.
We won't tell anybody. Yeah, we won't tell anybody.
I can trust you all, right?
Sure.
Let me just, you know, I think it's a great question. First of all, let me point out to you that as Surgeon General, the President nominates you, and then you have to have a Senate confirmation.
Right.
I was the first Surgeon General in the history of the country to be confirmed unanimously, okay? And in a very partisan Congress. Number two, when you go for that Senate confirmation, you have to be cleared for a top secret clearance. And then I got cleared above that, what's called SCI. They go all the way back to your childhood, and it takes a year. And they interview everybody you ever knew, every school you ever went to. They go through. So if they didn't find anything, there probably is not anything there. Okay. Okay. So, but I mean, that doesn't mean they're not going to throw stuff at me. I mean, it's still going to happen. I mean, Mother Teresa would probably go through a whole bunch of, you know, accusations, you know, because that's the way we play politics. They just throw things up on the wall. So I understand how the game is played. I've watched it. I've gone through it once. I was criticized for a lot of the things I was very proud of when I was on my way to be Surgeon General, which you know, there was nothing wrong with them, but the other side has to try and knock you down. I understand that.
I realized that I gave Dylan 2 questions,
Sorry?
but Andrea only one.
Okay,
so
okay.
Well, there's other people too.
Oh, I know, but I just want to.
Well, we've talked about Democrat issues here. I mean, we're in a state where the voter registration is split pretty much a third,
Third, right?
And even after Democrats have fielded candidates, the Republicans have stayed in office for a long
Yeah.
time. So how about the competition there on the other side in the general if you make it?
Sure. Well, right now, I think there's two candidates on the R side, and one is a career politician, and the other is a young man who is in business, in his family's business. So I think that they need to sort out their primary and see who comes out of that. But on the other hand, to me, it doesn't make any difference because I think that really what distinguishes me from anybody that's in the field is I've been here for a quarter of a century doing these jobs at a local, a state, and a national level. Any of the issues that are germane to the United States today, whether it be jobs, whether it be education, the economy, whether it be foreign policy, I've had a great deal of life experience from here right to the White House and Congress in those areas. So I think the public has to look at our backgrounds, at our track records, see where we have been. I'm hoping that most people look and want somebody to lead who's knowledgeable but is a voice of moderation. That is not somebody that's just going to add to the grenade throwing, because that's where I am. So hopefully, as I meet more groups like this and they see that I am a very centered, rational person and willing to work hard, and I have the experience to go with it, that I should be able to get the nod.
Tell us your thoughts about the Rosemont mine.
I haven't studied the Rosemont mine, and so I'll give you some general, because I've spent a lot of time out of here in Washington, but I'm aware of what's going on. As I look at the Rosemont mine or any other organization that would like to come into our community, I have to weigh, the risk-benefit. Whether it's a mine or a factory or anything else, if they're going to bring jobs, that's good, but not to the detriment of the environment. So, I mean, those things have to be balanced out. All mining companies, manufacturing organizations, anything else, we need to attract good jobs to come into our communities. We're hurting here. On the other hand, we have to be sensitive. So in mining, if we get more specific, I would sit down with the mining folks and say, I want to see your plan. How will you protect the environment? How will you preserve the aquifer so that our water does not get contaminated? What is your plan after the 20-year aging of this mine to return this land to what it should look like as a landscape in the desert? So I don't think it's bad or good. It really, the devil's in the details, and I would like to hear the story. But if I can't be convinced that these are sensitive people that want to preserve our environment and sensitive to the environment, then I wouldn't vote for it.
Mike? Assuming you get elected, which I certainly hope you do, it appears as if, at least on the Republican side, facts don't matter. Whatever sounds good, I mean, to call millionaires job creators when they're talking about $32,500 is absurd. How would you, as someone who knows a lot about facts and things how would you deal with the misinformation and or the information that just isn't real at all?
Well, I think, that has come to characterize politics in our country, that people just throw things out there, if nothing else to slow you down and put you on the defensive. Negative things about you or just bad information. I think if you look at my track record as Surgeon General, when I had to deal with issues like stem cells, abortion, Plan B, weapons of mass destruction, terrorism, you never heard me waffle, you never heard me move left or right. I stayed focused specifically on what the needs of the people were, based on the best science. And that's what I'm going to do as Surgeon General and as a senator. It's not going to change my approach, because my values are my values, and I look at this as a privilege to serve my fellow citizens. And after all, I have to come back here and live here, okay? And I'm going to be here quite often, all right? And I think, even after you're elected, I mean, some of our elected officials, they get elected, you never see them again, okay? And the fact is, my home is here. I never left. When I was Surgeon General, my home stayed in Tucson. Every chance I got, I came home. My first visit that I had a chance to take a trip from Washington, I bought a grant to Keno Hospital to be able to provide more services for underserved people. Okay, that was my first action as a Surgeon General, okay? So I didn't forget my community.
A science teacher in Tucson says that belief is not a science word.
Yep. You're entitled to your opinions, but not your facts. So. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Carmona, we would like to hear lots more from you specifically about some of the major issues in this country. And as a physician, I think one of the biggest threats to our health and the health of the environment and the health of the economy is climate change. So what do you propose to do about climate change? And as a part of that, we discussed a few views on carbon tax.
I'm sorry?
Carbon tax, or carbon fees.
Okay, I could do a dissertation on this. I'm going to try and do it concise. Certainly, I had a lot of experience with this when I was in Washington, and I'll recount the meeting I went to give you an idea. Right outside the executive office building, there's a row of townhouses that certain high-level people occupy. And there was an EPA office there that was the advisors to the president. So I was asked to come to a meeting where they were discussing global warming, and I remember sitting at the table, and everybody was going around, and I started listening to the discussion, which was really more political than science. You know, that, oh, this is a hoax, you know, it has this nothing, everything is fine. And I started thinking, this was like my first month or two as Surgeon General, and I started thinking, oh, I know why they invited me. They don't really understand. They would like me to explain it. Yeah, that's how naive I was. So I'm at the end of the table and say, well, Surgeon General, what do you think about global warming? I said, oh, well, look, I said, clearly warming is going in the wrong direction. Our carbon footprint is not what it should be. There's many things we can do. And I think we can, there's no argument that man assist in moving that along. You can argue how much. I mean, if you look at the science, there's legitimate scientists who will say, no, it's not that much. But no scientists say there isn't any contribution by mankind. So even if it's only a little bit of contribution, I said, shouldn't we all endeavor to try and preserve the environment the best we can? And where we can, recycle, where we can deal with waste, where we can reduce our carbon footprint, where we can protect our precious resources. Shouldn't we be doing that anyway, even if it isn't the only cause? I was never invited back to one of those. I went once. You know, so I think this is an issue that is very polar depending on which side of the aisle you sit on, but yet the science is, you know, pretty much in the middle there. It's clear that man does contribute, and there's many options, and certainly, you know, the carbon taxation issue and exchange issues and all of that. I think there's a number of remedies that can be put on the table, especially with the exchanges. But the most important thing is we have to raise the health literacy of all people to understand that we all have to take some personal responsibility. The remedy can't always be that we fund a federal program to undo all the bad things that we do. We all have to take some responsibility, just like we do for our health, to decrease the waste, decrease the carbon footprint. And I think the government's role should be to meet you there, to be able to assist you, to educate you, and provide infrastructure to ensure that happens.
As a former Surgeon General and a current member of the College of Public Health, what is your opinion on universal health care?
Well, if you're talking about, let me break it into two pieces. My sense is every American should have access to a basic set of health benefits. Period. The issue of universal, if you're talking about the business of medicine, now that becomes complex, because if you're talking about a single payer source, it becomes very controversial. And as Surgeon General, it's an issue I dealt with. And you know, you can fight battles in perpetuity in Washington, or you can find a scene that gets you place. Now, most of the time when I spoke to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, I could get them to agree that aspirationally, it would be a good thing that we all endeavor to figure out a way to provide basic health care for all of our American citizens, okay? The devil is in the details when you start to say, how do you do it? Who pays for it? Then it becomes very divisive. So I try and stay away from charged words like universal care, single payer, because they tend to stop the debate right away. Instead, I try and approach it as I did as Surgeon General to say, look, wouldn't you agree, even the most conservative people, wouldn't you agree that as citizens, as the richest nation in the world, we should not all aspire to figure out some plan that every citizen has access to health care? That opens the door. Then you start the discussion. The fact of the matter is, if you reality, is it likely that we're going to have legislation that says, with any president, okay, or any Congress, I should say, because the president, as you notice, has limited authority, okay? And so what solutions can we do incrementally to ensure that happens? If you go for it all and say, okay, I just want universal payer, universal health care, you know, it's a losing proposition. But if you say, let's just go by the premise that we want every American to do it, how can we have it? And what's the payment system? How should it be? There's a whole host of options. For me, the goal is let's get to making sure that everybody gets access to health care, and then we can argue the nuts and bolts of who pays and how it's paid and what Medicare, Medicaid should do. But I think the first thing on the agenda should be we all agree that we should be working together for a single value proposition, which is, how do I provide the best care for the most people at the least cost? That's the value proposition we need to pursue, and it's one you've never heard from any of your elected officials as they fight over who pays. Barbara, I'm sorry.
Well, my question was also
Yes.
about healthcare because the new healthcare, affordable healthcare, has the one part that's helpful to me because I have a son that has chronic health conditions and the fact that they cannot deny him coverage. But it looks like there's a big move to alter a lot of the parts of that healthcare. How can you talk to your fellow senators and get them to see how important that is to keep some of those elements of that bill that went through?
So for those of you probably all aware, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, okay, called Obamacare, it's really a misnomer.
Don't
because,
say that.
you know, but it's, that's, the right characterizes it that and then it becomes very much polar. The real issue is we have to get rid of the political dispassion and say, okay, we have this plan before us. What's good about this plan? Well, the first thing I think is good about it is that the fact is that we have moved to try and accomplish that aspiration of making sure every American gets some form of health care. We have the age of dependence up to 26 now. So if your child, the child's at school, and like my kids, it took a long time to get out of college, so you can give insurance for a little bit longer. That's good. The fact that everybody, but then when you start to get into the granularity of the system and you say, okay, so the idea is we're going to take, we have 50 million people that are uninsured, and that increases, of course, as our unemployment rate goes up. So now the plan is in the next, let's see, we're in 12, so the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to dump 32 million people into the healthcare system. Are there enough health professionals around to take care of 32 million new people? The answer is no. Okay. What about the money to pay for those people? So aspirationally, I think it was right to do. The problem was, in my opinion, is there wasn't enough due diligence as to who are the providers, where will they be, how do these patients get distributed, who actually is going to pay for their care. So I think we have some work to do. Your point is an important one, especially with somebody that's disabled, if your son is disabled. But a disabled person may have recourse through Social Security, through benefits through Social Security, as well as other special federal programs, as opposed to an average young man or woman who just is uninsured. But again, people come to say to me, well, Surgeon General, do you agree with Obamacare or the Patients Protection and Affordable Care Act? The press always likes to ask me that. And I'd say, which one of the 2,400 pages would you like me to comment on? It's a very complex document that has a lot of good things in it, but if you put the politics aside and you look at it, there are things we could do better. But we all should line up behind the aspiration to ensure that every American has access to health care. Then we can debate how we do it.
And then Moher, and then I think your A is signaling me.
It's okay, whatever you want.
Okay.
I want to make sure everybody gets their questions answered.
Dr. Carmona, last December, the DREAM Act passed the U.S. House, but stalled in the U.S.
Yeah.
What's your position
On DREAM Act? Well, I think the DREAM Act should be part of comprehensive immigration reform. And I think for those youngsters who have been brought here of no fault of their own and have grown up and gone to school and passed their courses, and now they want to go to college, why should we deny them that? I mean, they've been acting as citizens and such. Now, on the other hand, I would say, I would hope that we could attach something to this this obligation that we encourage citizens to have them complete their education. But this is a personal opinion. I think every young man and woman should do some kind of public service. So I don't mean military. Go work in the Peace Corps. Go work in the AIDS clinic. Go do something constructive for your community. So I would hope in return for granting these young people the education that we ask, just as I would ask any young person. Sir, I did, and I'm telling you, I did the same thing with my children. I told them, you need to do something for your community. Find something that you can do that you can bring added value. So I'm for the DREAM Act, but I don't want to deal with the DREAM Act as an isolated issue. I think it needs to be part of comprehensive immigration reform.
And that's the last question.
Dr. Carmona, as everybody's very aware that in Arizona, there is a large segment of people who really don't like people who don't look like them, who might look like you or who might look like me. So I guess my question is, have you, your wife, your family kind of thought about that and how you would deal with that issue?
Well, I think part of it comes into the thing that Ron Barber's talking about, civility, not only in government, but just being respectful of your fellow man. Let me tell you a story. When I was when I served in general, I did a lot of global traveling, and I got to see lots of different societies all over the world, meet health ministers, presidents, and see how inextricably we are really tied to the rest of the world. Whether you're worried about emerging infections or terrorism, the borders, these challenges that we face as a nation don't respect our geopolitical borders. That's the fact. But I remember one day I was in a very remote part of the world, and I saw a bunch of little Arab children in the desert, and they were huddled around a little black and white TV. And it was a TV that I think they had solar panel, and it was a wire. I don't know how they got it to work, but they and they were all. And I was, what are they doing? Do you know what they were doing? They were watching Sesame Street in Arabic. Okay? Now, let me tell you, that changed the way I thought. I went back and I spoke to, and I made great friends with Sesame Street. And I did a presentation one time at an international meeting, and it was on foreign policy. And I had the head, an ambassador, and I had an admiral, and I had people that had international experience, and I had the senior vice president of Sesame Street. And everybody said, why is Sesame Street there? And I said, they all gave their pitches, those, from USAID, Peace Corps, the ambassadors, all of this, and then admiral from the Public Health Service. And then I had the guy from Sesame Street speak. And then I said to the audience, I said, my contention is the greatest foreign policy export that this nation ever had is Sesame Street. You know why? It's been sustained for 40 years. It's translated into 110 languages and dialects. And what is the message? And no matter what language, peace, tolerance, health. So here's this group of kids that are poorly educated, huddled in the middle of nowhere, most of them malnourished, and what are they learning? Peace and tolerance. What turns it off? As they see the world around them. So I think a lot of this has to do with us making sure we raise our children appropriately, and make sure, as Martin Luther King said, it's not the color of your skin, it's the quality of your character. And I think that's what we have to do. It's up to us as adults and citizens to promulgate that, and not get bought into this vitriolic, craziness that's taking over us now. We should be able to sit down and have civil discussions, and always be respectful of others' opinions, and then move forward. And that includes color of your skin. Because to me, it's a colorless world. I grew up in Harlem and Washington Heights. There were only black and brown people there. They were all poor, okay? I mean, we grew up at a time in the 50s and 60s. Parents weren't responsible for your extracurricular activity. I learned to swim in the Harlem River. I'm so healthy today because I've been exposed to every pathogen. But growing up in that environment where color doesn't mean anything, it's the character. It's what you bring to the table to make the world a better place. And that's what I'm going to foster as a senator. And civility, tolerance of others, understanding. The world is a very unsafe place, but a lot of it is because of biases that are built in, and prejudices, and a lot of this very divisive discourse that hurts us all.
Well, we're going to get a break. One other thing I want to say, because I for a number of years I worked with a fellow named Ruben Nunez, who was one of your former colleagues, and he had your picture up in the office. And we worked with kids that were trying to get their GED, and we used your story a lot with them. So it's good to see you run for Senate. Thank you very much.
What can we do for him? What can we do?
Oh, yes. Yeah, there's a website and all that. So you can learn.
You can see I'm really brand new at this. We're just starting out. I have a web page up, and it's www.Carmona4Arizona.com. And there's a bio on it. There's a couple of statements about why I'm running, which questions I've answered earlier. And then there's a page for donations that you can do credit cards, you can do, let's see, by check. And we're gonna have a full website up, but I'm just recruiting the team and putting them together. But I would hope as time goes on, I mean, it's gonna take an army to get this done, as you all know, and I would hope that you would spread the word to your family and friends, and I think as we have an infrastructure together, and Gabby's team is helping me do that now, that I would hope that you all would be, become my agents and help me win this, and I'll promise you that I'll work very hard for you, just as I did as Surgeon General.
You need petitions.
Yeah, and your
Yeah.
petition.
You need to respond to that, because I signed up on that thing almost 2 months ago, and I haven't heard a word from anybody.
Well, there's no, well, look, 2 months ago, I only declared a month ago.
A month ago.
And so, for about several weeks, it was just me. And then Rod McLeod came, Rod McLeod.
And I donated money, I thought, let's get going.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate it. Andy Darkins, I hired a financial, Andy, step in here. Andy, we brought him in, he's our financial director. Rod's helping me, and I've hired 2 other persons. We're gonna get a political director. So we have a plan, but believe it or not, it's real hard to find qualified people to run campaigns. I mean, we're looking at people.
That's your petitions, you gotta have signatures.
I asked about the signatures, but I was told I had a little window of opportunity if I could get my infrastructure together and then reach out and ask people to help me with the signature.
Yeah, but there was a listing in the office for people who want to volunteer in campaigns.
We're precinct, these are precinct committees. We're your feet on the ground.
Thank you all.
All right, so
Do you have positions on immigration, education, public health, obviously?
No,
I know. So you have those positions soon up on your web, I mean, there are
Yeah,
questions that
we
we all.
have a web page of, which is limited.
Do it.
But we're hiring the IT people to put up those position papers on it. In the meantime, I'm happy to come and speak to any of you about any of those issues, just so if you want, I'll tell you exactly where I stand on those things.
I'll do the head